Almost kicked my table over. Hey, always get on with a little bit of, you look at that seal balancing a ball on its nose. Here I am. I'll just give you a quick look. That's the pool. It's only a little pool. I'm here in the little back courtyard. There's our retreat. Not our retreat. Our hotel. We're in Antalya, in Turkey. We've made it to the coast. Not that we've swum in the ocean yet, which is a little bit sad, a little bit remiss. We will definitely be swimming in the ocean today, I would imagine, definitely. Put definite on the future is always foolish in my opinion, but anyway, there we go. It's okay to be a fool. Today's date is something like the 27th or 28th, I'm not sure, of June, coming towards the end of June. And this is Chat with Matt. It's 8 a.m. on I think it's Thursday here, morning, so I'm a day late. Never mind, yesterday we had a busy day. We did a big tour around 3 ancient cities here, the ruins of the ancient cities on this bit of coast. Side, I can't remember the other two, but anyway, it was awesome. Had some awesome experiences, very, very deep energies. Again, some of these cities have foundations, well back into, 1000 BC sort of thing, or even earlier. It all gets a little bit sketchy when you go back that far. You've got to remember these places have been inhabited for so long that, as you can imagine, hey Kate, as you can imagine, people kind of just build over the top of what was there before. So it becomes a very deep archaeological dig, which was interesting to see as well, especially in Side. You could see where they were working down through the layers and finding stuff from ages ago. Hey Jill. So that was quite fascinating. It's a painstaking job and it's interesting, but you can imagine there's not much money for it. Even though there is a tourism potential income stream from redeveloping or restoring some of these ancient ruins. But yes, in terms of dedicating tax dollars and where it goes and how it's spent, I can imagine it's difficult for governments and whatnot. But anyway, I always find it interesting going to places with deep history, especially coming from Australia and New Zealand, where there is deep history, but there's very little remnants of it. The Australian Aboriginal left very little trace of, other than changing the landscapes, I guess, and some rock carvings, and down in Victoria there's some leftovers from where they were doing different forms of agriculture and stuff. It's not in your face. And then we've got, colonial heritage from whenever, 17, whatever. Not very old, 200 odd years, 220 years now, I guess. No, it's more than that. Bicentenary was 1988, but anyway, not long. And similar in New Zealand. There are some ancient structures, but they're very well hidden and pretty much denied by the government. And so, the narrative is a little bit historyless, or relicless anyway. We don't have many relics. We don't have much to remind us of historic times. Which sort of takes me into a question Kate asked, and I apologise I don't have my computer with me down here, about having the opportunity to meet up with someone from the past. There was a past that I was involved in as well, for clarification, our yoga path, which for me was from 96 through to 2011. My yoga path has gone longer than that forward, but in this particular iteration with a Indian guru, etc., or international guru really, but of Indian descent. Kate's question was around feeling nervous about meeting up with people and it was a very strong community in Australia, in Sydney, where we were. That's the pool somehow turning on. But feeling nervous that the dogma's creeping back in. Cue the running water. What's that got to do with emotion? So what I wanted to say to that, first and foremost, is it's normal to feel nervous. I think it's normal to feel nervous about any opportunity in our lives that is basically going to be transformational. There's going to involve some form of change that is potential for expansion. Revisiting relationships from our past, however much pain there might still be attached to those relationships, in whatever way, I'm talking far beyond just Kate's situation now, is an opportunity. And when you, I think Kate said, I can feel the dogma creeping back in, right? The rules and the expectations of a tight-knit community, some of which makes it tight-knit, is the sameness. Everyone was thinking the same way. There was a very strong hive mind, like as in beehive mind, in that yoga community where we were all focused on, to a certain degree, of course, there's always individuality in there, and of course I don't know what everyone else was thinking, but it seemed to be that everyone was very focused on similar goals, and that made the community strong in some ways but fragile in other ways, because there wasn't nearly as much diversity encouraged. It wasn't deliberately stamped out, but subconsciously it was, and I think this is true in many communities, spiritual or religious communities especially, I think, but you can see the same thing happening in other forms of social community, similar in the clubs that I've been involved in, the sailing club, the kayak club, the surf club, where there's around certain topics there's expectations, at least. And in the yoga community, it was verging on, if not fanatical, right, and cultish. I can use those terms without too much pain, but and of course, cultish is a term that can invoke all sorts of imaginations, visualizations, visions, but there's cultish behaviour in many structures, and family structures too, right? Families go through exactly the same thing. The community of the family has certain expectations, and people can get railroaded in that and lose themselves in that. And I think specifically with the community that Kate and I were involved in, a lot of us did lose ourselves significantly, and at the same time a lot of us found ourselves significantly in different ways. For me, the value of being in that yoga community for the best part of 15 years was opening my heart, right, through the devotion. Even though you could say now that the devotion was misplaced, on hindsight and seeing more into the founder or the point of dedication's motives, but nonetheless it worked, right, in opening your heart. And I'm just reminded of another quote that's not very popular in yoga, but I found it quite a few years ago now, but not when I was in the yoga community, was that all devotion leads to devotion to self eventually. So it was kind of a quote around the idea that Guru Bhakti leads to Atma Bhakti. Atma is the soul, right? Our soul, individual, the Jiva Atma. And so through the practice of Guru Bhakti, which is devotion to the master or the teacher, that you find devotion to yourself. And it's not just Guru Bhakti, but any form of Bhakti. Bhakti is devotion, so Bhakti to the deity of some description. In Oriental or Buddhism, quite often they use Bhakti to their family lineage. Is very big in some forms of Buddhism and some forms of different Asian tradition. The family, the grandparents, are the point of devotion, and through that devotion the heart can be opened to recognizing self. So anyway, I should probably get back to Kate's question. I've gone a bit off track. But I think the point I'm trying to make is to recognize that even though there were, quote unquote, uncomfortable aspects or disempowering aspects to the situation, there are also a lot of good things and a lot of deep friendships and a lot of a real appreciation of community for me came out of that experience of being in that community, right, where you really felt the benefit of knowing you had other people, you know, with you on that journey. And then subsequently the pain of losing that community through the disintegration of the focal point was also massive learning and an opportunity to once again stand on their own 2 feet. What that bird is and where it is. Anyway, Jill said, is it the case that as a community grows in size, someone always emerges as the leader and seems to feel the need to impose, come on, see more, impose rigid structures? Is it a control thing or a caring thing? Yeah, that's an interesting question, Jill. I don't think it's always the case, but it seems that energy dynamics, the way that we have been indoctrinated into it, is that it naturally seems to happen. And it's not always that someone emerges and feels the need to become the leader. I think group mentality in general looks for leadership. I think it takes a huge amount of conscious intent on the part of a group to stay very collaborative and democratic in a true sort of democracy, where everyone gets to have their say in equal portion. That tends to take a lot of conscious input to achieve that, because generally, based on our history, when we come together in a group, there will always be introverts and extroverts. There will always be people who feel more confident in their opinions than others, and that they will naturally be louder. And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't make the people wrong who are naturally louder. It's just their history. And it doesn't mean the people who are naturally quieter are wrong either. It's their history as well. Some people have had to shout for attention to survive, and others of us have had to shut up to divert attention to survive. They're both survival techniques, right? It's just different ways of going about the problem based on the situation you're in and your own personality and your own personal strengths and weaknesses. Some people have become extrovert to survive and get the attention they need. Some people have become introvert to survive and avoid the attention that they couldn't cope with. So that's normal part, and that's of course a radical simplification, introvert, extrovert, right, polarity. There are all ranges of people who operate in the spectrum, and introvert in some areas and extrovert in others. Some are, you know, different social settings, different topics will bring out people's passion, and they'll be more extroverted in talking about those passions, but not in other areas. Of course, right. So not to allow the oversimplification to become rigid or conclusional, but in general, group dynamics are a very, very interesting learning place, and for me, fascinating. So I'll read that in a second, Kate. So the point is it's very natural at the moment, based on our recent history of humanity, which is spanning back a few thousand years, let's just say, to promote the idea that it's very efficient to have a leader. Because in general, we've seen that it is, right? It takes far less energy for us all as a collective to appoint someone who we trust to make the decisions for us as a collective, right? So we have a say in voting someone in or approving of someone, to then make decisions for us. And of course we have then different levels of that. They can make minor decisions for us, but then if it's an important decision, which again is always that line in the sand, then we can vote on it, right? Or we can have discussion about it, so that input is sought, and so various leaders can be more or less listening to the feedback from the community before making decisions, right? But in general, humanity has kind of gone in this direction where we defer our energy to some form of governance or leadership structure, so that we don't need to be concerned with it day to day, and we can get about on the task of doing what we need to survive, right? Hunting, gathering food, building shelters, etc., managing the day to day, so that we're not worried about every single decision. We basically created a structure, a pyramid, where we've put a leader at the top, and we support the leader by doing all of the hard work underneath, so that they can dedicate more of their time to thinking about the big decisions that need to be made. Where should we move next? Where are the animals going to be going, right? This is based on tribal survival, and it has itself as a structure survived, of course, many generations past our tribal ancestry. But there we go. It's very natural to defer towards this sort of hierarchical, patriarchal structure when we come together in groups. And to move beyond that, Jill, requires us all to be very clear of what we are choosing intentionally as a community, and then be dedicated enough to devote energy to maintaining our intent, right? If we've decided that we're going to work collaboratively, we're going to work in a round circle rather than a pyramid, then we have to dedicate energy to overcoming our old habits of deferring to allowing an expert to make a decision all of the time, and not hearing the diversity of opinions in the circle, and applying weight to people's softer skills. And I don't like that term, but it paints the picture, right? People's intuitive knowing that they have no credible proof to say why they believe that would be a better way to go. To actually put some weight on someone saying, I feel we should just go this, we should do this, right? Even though they don't have any history of expertise in that direction. Okay. So yes, Jill, it's very normal, and unfortunately in most communities, most of the people still just like the idea of a leader, because it lets them off the hook. Most people are lazy, and most people don't want to be accountable. So they don't really want to make decisions, most people. They want the decisions to be made for them by someone else in a way that benefits them. And they only get upset when the decisions stop benefiting them. As long as someone's making decisions that benefit them, they're very, very happy for someone else to take that role of making the decisions, because it lets them off the hook. Then if something goes wrong, they get to blame someone else. They get to blame the leadership, and they don't have to take personal responsibility or accountability for their life. And most people, unfortunately still, most people are very much of that ilk, where they're scared of taking responsibility for themselves, and so they'll defer to leadership structures in order to avoid that situation, and would much prefer to be disempowered in their self than to be accountable for themselves. So we have to battle with that. All of us, each of us, myself included, have to recognise when that comes up and choose to step past it. Anyway, Kate said, what about the idea about there being a different morality that the elders are working from because of their different hang on, I've gone to the wrong thing. Because of them being from a different perspective given their awakening. Yeah. Morality is an interesting terminology. Yeah, so basically Kate's saying, you know, what about the idea that we defer to people who know more, right? To know more. And this idea that the elders, or the more spiritually awakened, or, as we've seen very bluntly in our society lately, the experts, people who have studied something and therefore given some form of title, we should just trust them, basically, because they have a different viewpoint. They have a more expansive perspective in the terms of elders, right? Because they've seen more history, or spiritually more awakened people. How we recognise that is very contentious. That they are looking at things from a different perspective because they are more awake. And it's true, all of us are looking at things from different perspectives. Each of us are looking at things from different perspectives, and I notice how my perspective changes throughout the day, you know, depending on what aspect of myself is more active in that moment. Am I coming from my smaller, egoically driven self that wants something for a particular reason, an emotional reason, or a past life, you know, aversion or desire reason? Or am I coming from a point of view of more awareness around those smaller aspects of myself and looking more from a soul perspective or a heart-centered perspective on a situation and what decision I should make? And it's interesting to me how, you know, it's easy to slip into a less conscious place. I won't say an unconscious place, but a less conscious place where you allow your smaller emotional self to make decisions, and sometimes big decisions, right, about what we should do in any particular situation, much of which is based on fragments of energy that are left over from the past, right? Desires and aversions, fears and phobias, trauma response, coping mechanisms, etc. So I believe that if we enter into that, good governance, working in community structures, comes from entering into conversations where everyone's opinion is welcome, and where people can be encouraged to come from a higher place, or a higher place that they can access. There will always be some of us walking on this planet who have potentially access to more wisdom or a more expansive perspective than others, and that's okay. It doesn't mean we need to defer to their opinion or their suggestion or their guidance. We're all here on the planet to have experiences, and it's valid to have an experience that is driven by our smaller self. It's still very valid to have an experience that's driven by our smaller self, even for a collective and for a group of people to choose to have an experience that's driven by a group of smaller selves, right, wanting something or trying to avoid something that they feel is going to be too uncomfortable for them, even though it might be for their best from a more expansive perspective. I don't believe it's a valid experience to just defer our decision making to someone else who obviously knows more than us and is coming from a more expansive perspective, or at least has access to a more expansive perspective. You have to understand, as I just described about myself, I have access to a more expansive perspective for myself. I'm not saying for you guys, from time to time, and then a lot of the time I'm still completely driven by my emotional egoic self. So the point is, do I poo-poo every experience that I have based on not being in my highest experience? No. Just because a guru or a teacher has access to a higher perspective, does that mean they make every decision from that higher perspective? Not at all. Never. Not one of them, right? And I don't care who they are. They are if they're in a body, still on this planet, they are subject to their smaller selves, desires and aversions, wants and needs, traumas, and all the rest of it. No one is 100% clean. No one ever will be if they're embodied. So, coming back to our earlier, as in decades ago, experience, Kate, just because someone has the potential to be making decisions from a higher perspective doesn't mean they always do. And doesn't mean that it's easy for them to do so either. And if you look at who's around the person, what's influencing them, how they're being manipulated by the people who are devoted to them, because that happens as well. This idea of morality, I think, is held on a pedestal that doesn't belong to be on. I don't think there's any validity to this idea that some morals are more valid than other morals, and that morals themselves are conclusional, or important. I think morals are just belief on a pedestal, right? Really, morals are just beliefs that have been put on a pedestal, and this idea of virtue, again, is subjective. What's virtuous for someone is not virtuous for someone else. What someone else sees as morally important is not at all important for someone else. And that someone else can be equally spiritually awakened and have just as much access to consciousness, if you like, and not nearly be as dedicated to a certain principle or value than someone else, because even though we might have more access to, just as much access to consciousness, it's diverse. And I think in the diversity is our strength. So it is interesting, again, coming back to what I was saying, prompting Jill's question around how community structures always seem to evolve and someone always seems to get put in place of power, is we like that. And I recognise in myself that we were in that yoga community. I very much liked the idea that I could trust Swamiji with my spiritual awakening, and all I needed to do was do as he says and follow the practices that he taught. And then everything was going to be looked after. That felt really, really good. That felt really safe. That made me feel calm. It made me feel cared for. It was completely disempowering, but I liked that. I liked that a lot. I liked the fact that I didn't have to take responsibility for something that I didn't know much about, but I liked the idea of it. So it was very easy for me to keep propping Swamiji up, to keep looking at him through an eye that he does no wrong, that he has my best interests at heart. I like that idea a lot. And so from that perspective, it was very easy to maintain that relationship, right? And so I recognise that I'm as much to blame for his shortcomings as he is in many ways, because I was propping him up and I was putting him on a pedestal where he probably didn't want to be either, but had deferred himself to. And yes, could he have taken himself down? Could he have cut himself down? Potentially. And did I witness him trying to take himself off the pedestal? Quite often, quite a lot. In many of his lectures, he tried to take himself off the pedestal, but of course we wouldn't let him come off the pedestal, because that would mean if he wasn't on the pedestal, who was looking after us? And if he wasn't great, then should we be giving him our trust? And do I want to take my trust back and apply it to myself and empower myself to make these decisions? No, I didn't at the time. Now I do. I've grown up. And so this is the point. When we're children, we want our parents to be great, because we want to be able to trust our parents. As we grow up, we recognise that our parents aren't great, but it's okay. We've taken responsibility for making those decisions for ourselves, and we love our parents anyway, even though we don't rely on them to make all of our decisions for ourselves anymore. It's a natural progression, and I believe that as a collective, Australia and New Zealand went through the awakening, or the painful process of reclaiming our power and stepping out of that disempowered relationship with the Guru at that time. And some of us were more ready to assume responsibility for ourselves than others, but unfortunately it happened as it happened, and there was a lot of pain felt by a lot of people. That is true. But anyway, I've missed a lot of comments, so I'm going to try and scroll back. Reminds me of you somewhat for me sometimes. I love the freedom here to choose always. Yeah, exactly. And any of us who choose to stand up and share our opinions runs the danger of others putting us on a pedestal, right? And wanting us to know more than them, and wanting to trust us that we know more about them than they know about themselves, which of course is ridiculous. Even though from time to time, of course, I can shed insight from a different perspective on what you're going through, and you can appreciate that, just as I do with other people, of course. I defer to other people to get insight on what's going on for me, because it's very hard to see your own blind spots. where other people have a different perspective and can see right through it. Yeah, I know I spent years telling you not to do that with me because I was still very much aware of that based on my previous history. Em said, anything to share about Julian Assange? Yeah, I think it's awesome. I don't know where it's going, and I only just saw that news 2 days ago when everyone else did on, just basically on my Facebook feed. But yeah, I'm pretty excited in general, and I think it is just one more step in the unravelling of societal control in a good way. So that's all I really have to share about that. I think it's awesome. I think it's natural that it is happening. I think the energy is all leading in this way, that the controls that have been put on society, the gags that have been put on society are not holding, and more truth is going to come out, and less fear-based control is going to be able to be applied, because we're all stepping out. We're all stepping out of that as a collective, and some of us are obviously a little bit more ahead in being capable of taking responsibility for ourselves and choosing to see beyond the control structures, and others of us are feeling a little bit scared by what's unfolding, and that's all appropriate. I still wanted to get back to Kate's original question, so I'm going to read through Jill. I'll read Jill now, and then I'll see if I can scroll around. Jill said, I'm asking Reeve, the brand new community that has sprung up in my town amongst the 2,500 households still receiving parasite contaminated tap water. We have no leader, but one person set up a Facebook page, so we've become an information sharing support group. Yeah, that's awesome. No one seems to be a leader yet. No, and that's fine, I think. I don't think you necessarily need a leader in that thing. I'll keep reading. Next comment said, being brought together through adversity, frustration and growing anger with the water supply company is difficult for me, as it's triggering for me all those emotional responses you describe. We are in a run up to general election. There are no traditional political leaders like an MP around. It's a vacuum. Yeah. It's a hard one, Jill. I definitely agree. We expect to have clean water running to our homes these days. Which is an interesting expectation, because much of the world doesn't have that luxury. That's the truth. Much of the world, the majority of the world probably doesn't have that. If you talk about population, 50% of the world probably does not have parasite-free water running to their homes. Many people don't have any water running to their homes. And yet, for us in our society, it is taken for granted, quote unquote, which is an interesting contemplation, that we take so many things for granted, that the water coming out of our tap, while it might not be so healthy for us because it's generally full of chlorine and other things that kills parasites, is generally safe to use. Me personally, I haven't trusted tap water for a very long time, and have had full filtration on every house that I've owned for the last over a decade now. Right where it comes off the street, it goes through 3 filters to remove anything that I don't want. Although I can't remove fluoride particularly easily until it comes to the kitchen tap, because fluoride filters are incredibly expensive and slow, and you can't generally filter the fluoride out of your showering water and your washing water and the water that goes in your pool and the water that you're putting on your garden, although I can filter most other things out before all of that happens at my place particularly. So I'm not making anyone wrong who doesn't do that, by the way. I'm just pointing out that I've taken personal responsibility for maintaining the cleanliness of the water that I allow myself and my family to use in most ways. And when I'm travelling, I actually travel with a 1.5 litre filter jug with multiple filters to change, and because I don't like just buying bottled water all of the time, although sometimes we have to. But I do my best to just keep refilling my water bottle from water that I'm filtering from wherever I am in the world. That's me. I very much prioritise my health without being fanatical and without being burdened by the worry of what I might be consuming. I choose to do what I can to prioritise healthy water for myself and safe water. Not through fear, although there are, of course, fear-based knowledge in that. Bad shit is in the water in most parts of the world, including New Zealand and the UK, obviously, Jill. But through the love. I want to give myself the best chance of being healthy and powerful, right? Not in a powerful way that is controlling others, but in a way that's capable of showing up as a positive influence in the world, because why not? Because why not? It's my choice to do that. And so I think situations like yours, Jill, which is, annoying, and we want the authorities to fix it, but I think at this point in time, what I want more and more is the authorities to disintegrate so that we can rebuild. So, so Jill said, I totally understand it's a first world issue, but it's quickly become a lack of trust issue situation now. And I think that's the positive. Okay, maybe you're about to say that, but the positive is many of us are now getting filters or distillers. We're all healthier in the end. Yeah, I think the point that I'm trying to make, and I think the point that is important for us all to get, is there should not be as much trust in these external bodies that we have given them, right? We have misplaced our trust into governance structures and support structures like the water board, the health system, the education system. We have trusted these systems because they are systemic, because they are so big, because they are so entrenched. We've trusted these structures that they're doing the right thing, but in many cases they're not. And of course they can't be doing, when you think about the education system can't be meeting everyone's needs. No education system ever will meet everyone's needs, not one that is nearly so systemic or all-encompassing. So why should we trust the education system is going to educate our children appropriately for all of their individual needs? Of course they're not. Of course they're not. And I'm not saying that we should have no education and everyone absolutely should be homeschooled. I believe there are definite places for community education to occur, which will always have to be centered around the majority needs. But I do believe our systems can be far more open to supporting the individual within the community. And I think that's a theme that I've been running with for a couple of years now, is this idea of unity within the community without losing individuality, right? Is this idea that we can all come together in community structures and feel the strength of the community structure without necessarily squashing the individuality out of each community member, so that we can recognise the strength of our community is based on the diversity of the members. The diversity of the members is actually our strength, not the sameness of the members. And if I go back to why the yoga community that I was involved with Kate fell apart back in 2011, why that fell apart was because we become far too similar and not nearly as appreciative of individuality. We'd become far too quick to shun anyone, not necessarily outwardly, but definitely inwardly, who had different opinions from the main narrative. So, yeah, awesome, Em. Em says she feels so lucky. And that's the point, right? We can appreciate what we've got, and also choose to look after ourselves as well. So I think one of the big benefits that's coming out of this, Jill, is the breaking of trust with structures that don't deserve our trust, right? And council water systems don't deserve our trust. They've been putting shit in that water for so long. The whole system is antiquated, and it's still based on the Roman system from 2,000 years ago, which was a huge advance. Like, I was just going through cities that are over 2,000 years old yesterday, and they had running water, not coming through pipes at that stage, but running water available to all their citizens. They had sewage systems, which is far beyond what they had in most of Europe at that time, right? And even 500 years ago in Europe, people were still throwing their shit out the window, out of the pot, onto the streets. The Romans had sewage systems taking it away, which was far healthier for their society, although their society still crumbled because they were out consuming their production, right? They stripped all of the land of the trees. They were already consuming far more than they were producing, and running the whole thing on a Ponzi scheme, basically running on slave labour. Consuming, right? This was 2,000 years ago. They made a huge amount of engineering and philosophical in many ways and mathematical discoveries and breakthroughs and improvements to living conditions, and yet we're still very much running in egoic mentality of low consciousness, and so of course it had to collapse, as we are seeing right now. Again, another iteration of the same thing. We've built up a society on technology, on new technology that's amazing, but it's coming to a change point, and the old system, which is based in the Roman idea of democracy, is coming to an end, right? And this way of swaying political power, buying the people's support, which they were doing in Rome, right? Various wealthy people would build things like bathhouses and stuff to basically please the people so that the people would support them in their political endeavours, which obviously made them very rich and powerful people, right? Which is what they wanted. We allowed rich and powerful people, or greedy people, to become rich and powerful. That's what we allowed, because they supplied us with things that we enjoyed. Right? We were bought. We were all slaves, and we still are all slaves. We're all slaving various ways and paying taxes on this idea that things are being supplied for us, but ultimately, in this things being supplied for us, in this society being held together, certain people are benefiting greatly and profiting in ways that is not so great. Anyway, yes, exactly. Em said even right angles that apparently destroy the water's capacity to be clarified energetically, it ruins it. Yeah, running water through pipes is not a great thing. But can we all find mountain streams, unpolluted mountain streams to drink out of? Unfortunately not. Or artesian water that's bubbling straight out of the ground. The best water has come up from a spring and is now running down a rocky bottomed stream, right? Unpolluted rocky bottom stream where the water is tumbling and being aerated and oxygenated after coming up through many layers of filtered material through the earth, right? And has rained down in somewhere else and gone down through the layers into the earth, picked up important minerals, and is now very clean, very good, and then it's being structured as it runs down a stream. Great when you can get it, but it's that is a luxury, unfortunately, that most of us don't get to experience very often. Anyway, my friends, I'm sure I've gone over time just for a change. Yeah, 43 minutes, so I will get off this. Hopefully that's helped Kate. The important thing, I think, is to recognise, and I don't think I summed this up very well at the time, is that it's normal to be nervous, and to recognise that the fears that are coming up in you are coming up to release. And I think it's valid to what's the term I want to use? To care but don't worry, right? Is to recognise that all of these old dogmas are present, and having them re-triggered is not a bad thing as long as you do it within a way that you can cope with at the time, right? So it doesn't help to be triggered into a full breakdown, but also it doesn't help if we keep protecting ourselves from ever feeling those triggers. So I think it's awesome to meet with people from our past in general now. I'm talking for everyone. To meet from people from our past, even if that past has been hard and we want to forget aspects of that past, I think it's appropriate to remember and to recognise that we've moved beyond it. Because if we keep trying to push it away, it's kind of got a lot of power over us because we haven't faced it. Anything that we haven't faced, we're still scared of because we're not sure that if we face it, whether it will destroy us or whether it will really hurt us to some degree, if not destroy us, but set us back, right? So we're now scared of it. In facing these old traumas, in facing these old fears, we become more powerful in ourselves because we recognise that we've survived it. And if you don't survive it, then you've got another chance, right? Not to fear death either. But I think, as many great saints have said, we can only feel love, or we can only enjoy love to the degree at which we're willing to feel pain. And so we have to be willing to revisit some of our pasts, all of us, in very many ways, in order to move beyond those pasts. It's not good, it's not useful just to try and forget them forever and push them away and never visit them again, because then they're always lurking in the shadows. Yeah, exactly. Jill said there's a jokey question that gets posted in England. Whatever did the Romans do for us? Yeah, other than come and give you roads and sewage and all of the rest of it. Yeah, awesome, Jill. Using the spring water to drink and filtering the water that you use in the house. That's what I would encourage you to do. Put a sediment and a carbon filter on the house so that you don't have those parasites in your house, and then drink spring water when you can, and wash and shower in better clean water without the chlorine, without the other crap, parasites, etc. Anyway, I will continue. We're moving today from Antalya down to Olympus, and so we'll be there for 5 days looking potentially at more options for retreat venues, and enjoying some time on the coast here in Turkey. And I will endeavour to be back with you next week, potentially Wednesday, but maybe Thursday. We'll just see how my week unfolds. But anyway, much love to you all, and keep your chins up. Keep trusting that life is giving you opportunities to express yourself in expansive ways, and enjoy what you can when you can, and don't get too caught up in what's not great. Just trust that there's opportunities in all of that stuff, even if it's painful. Much love. Bye for now.